Hi, and welcome back to the Red Zone Warriors Fantasy Football Show. I am your host, Rob the Commish Smith, here as always with our proud Lions fan, Jay Kush Man Corsel. How's it going today, Kush Man?
Going well, going well. There's actual football on TV, so I have a throbbing, massive erection, like 24/7. Especially the Lions are playing tonight against the lowly Cleveland Browns without Josh Gordon. So I'm looking forward to watching the Lions kick some ass tonight, and hopefully this erection will go down at some point, or I might have to go to the hospital.
You'd have to go to the hospital. I've been there. Anyway, tweet us all your fantasy football questions at Red Zone Warriors. There's a lot of keeper questions going on right now. Which guy should I keep in what round? What's the best value? What's best for my team? So go ahead, tweet us at Red Zone Warriors. All right, so we, as promised, are going to be discussing the training camp battles, the information coming out of training camp and so forth this week in the AFC. So we're going to start today in the AFC East with the Buffalo Bills, who started the first preseason game in the Hall of Fame Bowl, or game, if you will. So they're actually having 5 preseason games. Lucky them. So we're going to go through here. We're going to talk about the major skill positions, touch base on all these skilled players a little bit, our thoughts on them, and what we're hearing about them out of camp. So, you know, from a quarterback perspective, of course, the Bills did open their camp earlier than any other team, you know, because of that preseason game last Sunday night in Canton. E.J. Manuel is there. I'm not sure that's a good thing. He is the huge key to the offense. Again, not probably a good thing, coming off a less than inspiring rookie season, to say the least. You know, the reports there indicate he's kind of gotten off to a slow start in camp, which he didn't help himself much with the lackluster, 2 for 7 showing against the Giants in that Sunday night game either. So it's not looking good for EJ. You know, I'm wondering there if the owners and the upper brass there are kind of wondering if they're going to be drafting a QB next draft, because they have a lot of talent in Buffalo for sure. They went up the board to get Sammy Watkins and Spiller and so forth. Is a great talent there if he doesn't have a high ankle sprain. So they have enough talent to make it in the playoffs and such. I'm just not sure they have the quarterback to do that. So time will tell this year. I think this is his make it or break it year for him and the coaching staff. So moving along to the running backs, one Mr. C.J. Spiller kind of hurt a lot of people last year, of course. If any owners of him clearly know that. Again, dealing with a high ankle sprain all last year. He got the start for the Bills in the preseason game against the Giants, but only got 1 touch, and that's really not all that rare for these guys. Somewhat of a veteran, and don't want to risk, of course, injuring him. He is entering the last year of his contract. Will try to rebound, like I said, from the disappointing season he had last year. I mean, it showed some toughness. He tried to play through the high ankle sprain, but that actually could have been to the detriment of us fantasy owners, because even though he ultimately put up more yards and fantasy points than Fred Jackson, everyone expected more. Speaking of Fred Jackson, we didn't see much action from him in the game, but he did seem like last year to be the primary back. Once the Bills they had recovered a fumble there in the red zone, he went right in the game. So again, this is one of those deals where these two figured to split carries throughout the season, with Jackson, who's very well trusted, by the way, by the coaching staff. They rave about him. They extended his contract, so he's definitely going to play a role there. And he's a guy you can get in late rounds. Will get a lot of red zone work as well. So just on a side note, they did bring in Bryce Brown from Philadelphia. He had a pretty impressive debut there Sunday, with Spiller only getting 1 carry, included one 19-yard run for what that's worth. So Jay Spiller, he's going as the 17th running back off the board according to Fantasy Football Calculator, 12-man PPR ADP, which is the beginning of the 4th round. He's going after guys like Reggie Bush, Alfred Morris, Zach Stacy, and before the likes of Shane Vereen, Gerhart, and Jennings. Now, Jay, I don't believe you owned Spiller in any leagues last year, but just knowing what you know about him in last year, but then finding out that he was dealing with a high ankle sprain that we didn't really know about till the end of the season, how do you feel about his ADP, and would you take any of those guys before or after him?
Well, I'm a little, scared of Spiller. I didn't have him last year, but the Jimmer, who's usually with us, did, and I saw, the devastation that it caused him. So I would definitely take Vereen, Gerhardt, or Jennings before C.J. Spiller, especially in PPR with Vereen. Uh, like I said, the high ankle sprain, that's something that, it could happen again very easily. Um, and you got Fred Jackson there on top of it. So Spiller's somebody I would take later. If he was a fifth, sixth round guy, I might be interested in him. But fourth round's too early for him there. Again, Vereen, Gerhardt, Jennings would definitely be some guys I would take before C.J. Spiller.
Yeah. Well, and alternatively, Fred Jackson, though we said Spiller's going at the 17th running back off the board, Fred Jackson's the 37th, pretty much at the end of the 8th round. So as far as value goes, if you're going to pick one of these running backs, considering what we saw Fred Jackson do last year, yeah, I think I'd much rather take Freddie there at the end of the 8th, than Spiller in the beginning of the 4th. So, as far as wide receivers go, of course, the star of training camp has been Sammy Watkins. Surprise, surprise. Who the Bills, of course, paid a steep price for to trade up and get him on draft day. He was shut out in the first preseason opener against the Giants. They did try to feed him the ball, but again, EJ wasn't looking too good. He was having some balls batted down to the line of scrimmage. But there's clear signs that the team is going to rely on him heavily. He did get 3 receptions in their second preseason game for 21 yards. Versus Carolina there. Stevie Johnson, if you guys weren't aware, he was sent from, shipped out to the 49ers in the offseason, so he's no longer there. But the potential replacement for him is Mike Williams, who was acquired from the Buccaneers, and also Robert Woods, and it was kind of a surprise to all of us, both fantasy and just NFL homers in general, that Woods did not see any snaps with the first team offense on their first preseason game. They kind of thought that was going to be the case, but Mike Williams was in there. So that was interesting. We'll have to keep an eye on that. But those 3 figure to be the team's top 3 receivers heading into the season. Sammy Watkins is going as the 36th wide receiver off the board at the beginning of the 8th round. After guys like Golden Tate and Terrence Williams, but he's going before Decker, Amendola, and Dwayne Bowe. For me, I stay away from Amendola because, he just, I heard, broke his ankle or something. Who knows? The guy just can't stay on the field.
He's a fucking cripple.
Yeah. And I could give a rat's ass about Dwayne Bowe. The guy just can't get it done. But I would probably take Decker over him. I'm kind of getting a little higher on it. I know we went to the Jets and leaving Peyton Manning and all that, but I just, Sammy might have more upside, but I think if I had to choose, I'd probably go Decker over Sammy. Just rookie wide receivers rarely do well, with EJ Manuel factor included in that. Not that the Jets quarterbacks, whoever that's going to be, ultimately may not be that much better, but I think I just feel better with Decker. Maybe that's because I am a Denver Broncos fan. Got my little angel on my shoulder there. And then Robert Woods, as I mentioned, has a late-round flyer, and he's late because he's going as the 64th wide receiver in the 14th round, and Mike Williams is going undrafted. So these are late-round guys you can maybe plug in on a bye week, and that's about it unless you're in a really, really deep league. And to end it here with the Bills, we'll talk about the tight ends real quick. The Bills, man, they've just been decimated by injuries at this position early on in camp. The veteran Scott Chandler and the newcomer Tony Milwaukee from Kansas City, they're both sitting out with hamstring injuries and wound up missing the Giants game. So none of these. Chandler was a guy who you might hope to get a red zone score, but you were just praying and lighting candles for that to happen. None of these guys are worth anything from a tight end perspective, not draftable, and all that. So that's essentially it for the Bills. Again, tweet us any of your questions about the Bills at Red Zone Warriors. We'll be happy to answer those questions for you on Twitter. But Jay, let's move along with another team from the AFC East, and that is one Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, the Dolphins. The Dolphins. Land of who knows what the fuck's going to happen with their fantasy team. So we'll get right down to it. Mike Wallace returned to practice. He had a hamstring injury. He only missed 5 days of work, which confirms that the hamstring tweak was extremely minor. he actually remains one of my favorite bounce-back candidates. He's kind of filling the Deshaun Jackson role in the Dolphins' new Eagles-like offense. And I mean, this guy last year, he quietly set a career high last year with 73 catches last season. So I think if he stays healthy, I see his chances of pushing 80+ catches this year is pretty good. So Mike Wallace has got to definitely keep an eye on. Noshan Moreno could miss the entire preseason. His initial timetable was 4 to 5 weeks. It's been 6 weeks since his knee scope. And Moreno, quote, still labors to walk, let alone run, and, quote, is still unsure when he'll return. That's from the Miami Herald. Lamar Miller will continue to handle first-team carries, and he remains the heavy favorite to start in Week 1. Before Friday's practice, Moreno was sporting ice packs on both knees, and had, quote, an awkward gait as he made his way to work with trainers. He said, I don't know, when he was asked if he'd even play in an exhibition game. So at this point, I wouldn't advise drafting Moreno, save for the deepest of deep leagues.
Now, Jay, they did take him off the PUP list, but again, with all that stuff you just said, that doesn't give me any warm fuzzies.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just because he's off the PUP list, that means he's physically able to perform, as in hobble his ass over to the bike and maybe pedal for an hour. But I mean, we heard, him coming into training camp, he was out of shape, he was overweight, he was not in football shape or form at all. I mean, so really, it seems like maybe he doesn't even want to play anymore. I don't know. But Lamar Miller is definitely going to be somebody to watch because Moreno is not going to do much this year, I don't think. Also, according to the Miami Herald, speaking of Lamar Miller, there is hope in the Dolphins camp that Lamar Miller can play the role of Shady McCoy.
Good luck.
Yeah, good luck. It's a bit of a ridiculous comparison by the Miami Herald. So, new offensive coordinator Bill Lazor spent 2013 in Chip Kelly's staff in Philly. They led the NFL in rushing yards per carry at 5.1 yards per carry. Now, obviously, like we just said, Miller lacks McCoy's lateral explosiveness, but he's got a speed. He's speedy guy. He's feedback. He's dangerous in open space. Early in July, Miller actually met with McCoy to discuss how to thrive in the system that Lazor has brought from Philly to South Florida, and he watched some of Shady's game tape.
Jay, I could talk to Bon Jovi about how to be a rock star, but that ain't gonna happen.
Yeah, exactly. Lamar Miller is not Shady McCoy. Now, does this give us hope that they may use him a bunch? Yes. So he might be somebody to grab, especially at his ADP. The beat writer down there from Miami said he looks good and he's stronger than he's ever been. He's gained 6 to 8 pounds of off-season muscle, and the coach said he doesn't believe he's sacrificed any speed whatsoever. So he's shaping up to be a potential steal. Like I said, a 7th round ADP. Come on, you can't beat that. The Miami Herald is also reporting that wide receiver Javaris Landry has been a standout in Dolphins camp. Quote, the rookie wide receiver has displayed strong hands, solid routes, and toughness. He adds that Landry has made several of the most impressive catches thus far in training camp. Certainly high praise for a rookie. Most reports on Landry are positive coming out of training camp, but he's still a rookie, and he's still got to beat out Brandon Gibson for the wide receiver 3 slot. So he's not the fastest player. He's got solid toughness about him. He's often compared to former Steelers great Hines Ward for his ability to take tough hits going across the middle. So he could be a definite, guy that they're going to use, especially in the red zone. We'll just have to see what happens as training camp moves on. So that's all I've got for Miami. Rob, you're going to talk about the much maligned New England Patriots.
Yeah, I don't know about maligned, but before we move on, I mean, first of all, I wish my last name was Lazor. I mean, that's like awesome.
Dude, that is almost as cool as if your last name was McGillicuddy.
Fair enough. All right, so New England. New England, the hated Patriots. From a Broncos fan perspective, meet you in the AFC Championship game, probably. So at quarterback, we have the one, the only Tom William T. Brady. That's probably not true. It's probably something else. He's clearly still the man there, and he still has a smoking hot wife.
Here, here. Here, here.
There is that. Not much else to say, except that his dress is questionable at best a lot of the time. All right, Brady is going as the 8th quarterback off the board at the beginning of the 7th round. It's weird even saying that. He's going after Foles and RG3, but before Matt Ryan, Cam Newton, and Romo. You know, this wasn't the way it was about a month ago. His ADP rose up the board from like the probably around 12th QB off the board, with all the positive news coming out that Gronk will be playing, will not be on the PUP list, and will likely be there for the first game. So, as Gronk goes, Brady's ADP goes pretty much. Running back. Let's talk about the running back clusterfuck that we have in New England, as always, thanks to Captain Hood. In spite of the fumble problems of last year, and Mike Reese's speculation that the roster spot isn't safe, supposedly, Stephen Ridley should still expect to be the Week 1 starter for the Pats. 4th-round pick James White is all the buzz in Pats training camp, if you haven't heard this already, and will probably have a role there, along with a healthy Shane Vereen, to have been kind of locking up the roster spots there for the running back. So, it's always a cluster with these guys. You never know who's going to get the ball, who Belichick is going to play. If Ridley fumbles in the preseason or fumbles game 1, he could be out for 2 or 3 games. At least LeGarrette Blount left, so at least there's that. But with James White being all the buzz, he's basically going to essentially be the handcuff for Ridley more than Vereen. Vereen's probably the safest guy to have if you're going to pick one of these running backs, and only really if you're in a PPR league for Shane, unless he's a late round kind of running back depth in a standard league. But currently Vereen is going 18th running back off the board in a 12-man PPR league. That's the beginning of the 4th round. If he's healthy for 16 games, which is a question mark there, the guy could catch 80 to 90 balls out of the backfield. So again, ADP is why you want to draft this guy. He's going after the likes of Morris, Zach Stacy, and Spiller, but he's going before Gerhart, Jennings, and Bishop Sankey. So Jay, I know you're high in Vereen. I assume you would definitely take him over Gerhart, your boy Jennings, and the rookie Sankey?
Yeah, I absolutely would. Listen, Shane Vereen could have been a beast last year had he not got injured in game 1. I mean, he scored like 36 points in the first game and broke his wrist. Now that's not going to be something that's going to come back and haunt him. It's not like a knee injury or an ankle injury or anything like that, or a neck injury like David Wilson just retired over. So this guy will be back. He's the one guy in New England that you can pretty much count on, because he's not going to be splitting carries really as much as he's going to be getting thrown the ball constantly. So, like you said, 80, 90 receptions if he stays healthy for 16 games. PPR leagues, he is definitely worth a 4th-round pick. He's a high-end running back, too, as far as I'm concerned, in PPR leagues. So,
yeah,
Shane Vereen, awesome.
Well, and I will say Ridley, it's sketchy to draft him. You're not going to feel good about it, but he's going as the 33rd running back off the board at the end of the 7th round. It's one of those deals where if you draft wide receiver heavy, tight end early, that sort of thing, and you're pressing for running backs in mid to late rounds, I mean, Ridley, he's a boom or bust guy. I mean, again, he could fumble and be out and barely play, or he could revert back to what he did 2 seasons ago, and he could, score 12, 13, 14 touchdowns for you. So it's really hard to say, but then when you add the James White factor to it, people are kind of shying away from him, which is making him a good value if you have the stomach to hold him on your roster. So, all right, wide receiver perspective, it's New England. I mean, Danny Amendola, of course, he didn't impress during his first season with the team, but of course he wasn't healthy, as he rarely is. But he's still guaranteed $2 million, so he's going to play. The franchise wasn't in any hurry to re-sign little white boy Julian Edelman. Actually, Danny's pretty much the same size. In free agency this year, but he also has significant guaranteed money, so he's definitely going to make the roster as well. And I think Mr. Tom Brady has said he's pretty much his favorite receiver, which we saw that last year when he threw him, like 110 balls. Brandon LaFell, of course, was signed this offseason, after a pretty impressive year in Carolina. I mean, impressive wide receivers in Carolina, those words shouldn't even go together. But, we've seen this in the past, Chad Ochocinco, these guys, it's hard for these guys to go in and learn the playbook. It was hard for the rookies, Aaron Dobson and Kimbrel Tompkins to learn the playbook last year, and between that and injuries and stuff, they were barely on the field. So those guys will probably they will definitely make the team. There's guys like Josh Boyce who may or may not make it, but it's irrelevant for fantasy anyway. Tompkins has outperformed, both Boyce and Dobson. He's kind of the guy that I would probably target in late rounds if you're going to pick one of these guys. Tompkins is currently being undrafted in 12-man PPR league, so he's a guy you could pick up off waivers, frankly. But I have more confidence in him than Aaron Dobson. By the way, Aaron Dobson had a screw put in his foot, similarly to Julio Jones, who I'm also staying away from for that very reason. So, Edelman is the guy there. I mean, outside of Gronk, of course. Edelman's the guy. He's going as the 25th wide receiver off the board in PPR leagues. That's the very end of the 10th round. He's going after guys like Deshaun Jackson, whom I can't stand, T.Y. Hilton, who's also kind of risky, and before Jeremy Maclin and Kendall Wright. So, if you think the Gronk factor is not going to affect him too much, I mean, Wes Welker played a good role there, caught a lot of balls when Gronk was healthy too. So, Edelman's probably the guy if you want to risk, or not risk, but you're willing to spend an end of the 5th round pick for. But guys like Amendola, he's going 39th. I wouldn't touch him with Jay's 10-foot pole.
That's just true, by the way.
He just can't stay on the field, man. I'm not, fool me once sort of deal there with Amendola. All right, so let's talk about Gronk. Big Gronk.
Hey, before we get into Gronk, I wanted to weigh in a little bit on Edelman.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had him last year. Ended up getting him off waivers early in the season. And listen, Julian Edelman, especially if Amendola gets hurt, Edelman is going to be basically the only receiver there that's going to be worth having, besides Gronk, obviously. The guy is going to catch a lot of balls. If you see Amendola go down, try to get Edelman, trade for him, or draft him if you think Amendola is going to go down, because that guy will catch 110 balls this year easy if he stays healthy and Amendola's out. So Edelman is definitely somebody worth having. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, he's one of those guys. It's not a sexy pick. You don't really feel great about picking him in the 5th round. You just kind of you wish it's one of those guys you just wish you could get in the 7th, and then everyone forgot about and whatever. And
I agree. So the only thing I would say is that he's obviously not going to be a high-end wide receiver 2. He's going to put up wide receiver 2 numbers a lot, but mostly it's probably going to be a flex play. If you got a league, you've got more than one flex position, he's definitely somebody you should be looking at.
Yeah, well, let's not forget, Shane Vereen missed a lot of ball games last year, and that's probably one of the reasons, in addition to Gronk being out, that Julian did catch 110 balls. So I gotta think his numbers go down. I can't imagine him doing the same thing again, especially if those guys can stay in the lineup. And these rookies are back in their 2nd year. They're healthy finally. They're going to have some downfield threats that they didn't have last year because of injury. So I just think that's a little too rich for my blood in the 5th round. If he falls a round or two, I would scoop him up for sure. But it's just I think there's too many positive things coming out of camp from a ball catching perspective to think Julian's going to put up the numbers he did last year. But that's just me.
Well, I smell a couch shot bet coming out of this at some point in the near future. We'll have to revisit this conversation next week's show when I'm in Denver with you, and we'll have a little talk about where we think Julian Edelman will end up this year and how many couch shots you're going to do.
I see an over/under on receptions is what I see brewing here.
Absolutely, I'm into that.
All right, so Gronk, as Sigmund Bloom says on Fantasy Football Guys, Gronk smash. Gronkowski, he's supposedly ready to go after tearing his ACL last season. Now, I will say, if you guys saw that play, I mean, that would have tore Hulk's ACL. I mean, it wasn't just because he's injury prone or whatever. I mean, that was a brutal hit to the side of his knee. It would have, you know, taken my leg completely off, just tore his ACL. But that would have happened to anybody, so I'm not too down on him because of that. It's just the litany of other issues he's dealt with over the past couple of years. But, it's a risk-reward thing again with this guy, but at least, a glass half full sort of perspective here is that he's not dealing with the issues he was dealing last year at this time. Whether that's good or not, I mean, it's good, but it's still not to the level that we're dealing with it, but there is something he's coming back for, which is a torn ACL. I think it was MCL as well. So, he's a guy, I mean, y'all love him because of what he can do, but people love him or hating as far as drafting him because people are scared to death of him, or the other side is, he can win you the league. So Gronk has now vaulted up the ADP after all this information about him being healthy and not being on the PUP list and starting week 1, as well as Brady's ADP. He's going as the second tight end off the board now, before Julius Thomas, who was previously second just after Jimmy Graham at the 301. So what I do like about this is that it does drop Julius down. I mean, essentially, that's what I like about this. I know it's a little too risky. I think Jay and I agree on this. He's boom or bust, man. And to grab a guy in the 3rd round, I know he's a difference maker, but I think Julius Thomas is probably play just as well, and he still have Jimmy Graham. So it's not, the position scarcity isn't quite what it was with him not there. So I don't know. It's not for me, but a lot of people are scooping him up and wouldn't think twice about it. Jay, I'm pretty sure you feel the same way.
Oh, dude, listen. I wouldn't touch Gronkowski with my 10-foot pole. It's not going to happen. The guy is a walking train wreck. I agree the hit last year was a brutal hit, but that doesn't mean he's not going to take another one. He's a big, huge guy, so that means he's a big target. So Brady can chuck the ball up over the middle, get it to him. He has to extend to go get it. One of those linebackers just plows into his knee. Game over. Gronk's going to be sitting on the bench again. So I'm not wasting a 2nd, 3rd round pick on the guy. I just can't do it. I mean, I have a hard time with drafting Jimmy Graham or Julius Thomas in those rounds. It makes me sick thinking about it. It's just not my thing. Some people love it. It's not for me. But hey, look, if you want to do that, by all means, go ahead, and please let me know what league you're in so I can try to join it, because when Gronk gets hurt, take advantage of you and steal your money. So we'll move on here from the Patriots to a team that I really, and for no reason really, I just hate this team.
Well, it's because they suck.
It's not even really just that they suck. I mean, I love the Lions, and they suck.
True that.
But the Jets, dude, I just can't. I don't like Rex Ryan, for one. I think he's a douche. I don't know. They just don't excite me. There's nothing exciting about this team. So let's talk about the lowly New York Jets.
Look, I will tell you right now before you get started, the thing you can be excited about this team is that Eric Decker is there. And it's not because of Eric Decker. It's because of his smoking hot wife. Holy crap.
What is it with you and knowing what all of these NFL players' wives look like? Are you like some kind of creeper?
Hey, man, I'm on Twitter. What can I say?
All right. So the Jets running backs coach Anthony Lynn confirmed Chris Ivory is the favorite to be the Jets goal line back this season. Quote, if we were playing tomorrow, Chris Ivory would be on the goal line, obviously, said Lynn. Sometimes in those situations you have an extra defender that you can't block, and you need a guy that can take him on. That guy is Chris Ivory. He's 220 pounds, and he will serve as the short yard vulture. Chris Johnson is not going to get goal line carries, ladies and gentlemen, which isn't a big surprise. So Ivory will probably struggle for weekly starting ability in fantasy leagues. Barring a CJ.5K injury.
Well, and Jay, I will say too that if you watch the last preseason game, their first one just yesterday, I believe, Ivory already went out with a rib injury. So he's out with a rib injury from a hit he took during that game. He has a sordid history with injuries as well. So just keep that in mind.
Well, the Jets, like I said, one of the reasons I probably don't like the Jets is because I never want to draft anybody that's on their team. I always look at everybody and I'm like, no thanks. Eric Decker, possibility, but probably not. I'll probably let somebody else gamble on that fucking hot mess. So the running back coach also indicated that the team will limit Chris Johnson's usage in an effort to, quote, keep him fresh. The Jets may believe that Johnson would produce more big plays if given fewer carries. Quote, he's got some miles on him, Lynch acknowledged. So we're going to give him sorry, let me restart that. Lynch acknowledged. So we're going to have to be strategic in how we use him and when we use him, just to keep him fresh so that he can be the explosive playmaker that we want him to be and that we know he can be. So this looks like a three-headed attack here. They're going to use Bilal Powell. They're going to use Chris Ivory. They're going to use Chris Johnson. So with declining volume, Johnson's going to be a dicey RB2 fantasy investment and one I'll be letting somebody else gamble on because he's on the fucking Jets.
It's because he sucks, man. He really does.
Yeah.
He just sucks. And what we have learned from him in the past is that, he's so up and down, and at the end of the season he has 1,000 yards. Like, oh, well, he finished 12th running back, and he had 1,000 yards. But you look at his weekly numbers, he's horrible. And by the way, he needed volume. So when they say they want to lessen his load to keep him fresh, if he doesn't get that volume, he's never going to produce from a fantasy perspective. If you're going to gamble on him as an RB2, good luck to you, my friend.
Again, please call me. I'll join your league. All right, so moving on, the Jets are not expected to use Michael Vick as a, quote, change of pace quarterback like they did with Tim Tebow. Rex Ryan has learned his lesson, apparently. This is Geno Smith's team. Vick is the clear backup. Vick didn't impress during the spring, and he hasn't made much noise in training camp, and at 34, he'll basically serve as a mentor for the 23-year-old Geno Smith. I do believe I called that back in our early episodes of this show.
I can't hear you cutting out. I will say, although I don't trust...
Fuck you! Did you hear that?
I don't trust any words that come out of Big Rex Ryan's mouth, but he did say Vic played incredibly the other night in their first preseason game, for whatever that's worth, which is probably nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Worth nothing. So back on Chris Johnson a little bit here. He participated Saturday in his first full contact action since his offseason knee surgery. He ran with the starters for a few drives on Saturday's intra-squad scrimmage. I like that word, intra-squad. All right. He rushed 5 times for 14 yards. The knee that he insists crippled him in Tennessee last season is no longer a concern. Still, I'm not drafting a 29-year-old in September back who doesn't break tackles and won't get any goal line work. Coach Rex Ryan revealed 4th-round wide receiver Shaq Evans is dealing with a pretty significant shoulder injury and could end up on season-ending injured reserve.
I'm drafting him. I'm drafting him because I want a guy named Shaq on my team.
Well, dude, why wouldn't you? I mean, doesn't everybody? So Ryan described the injury as, quote, pretty bad. Wow, Rex, way to be descriptive. Reports out of camp haven't been glowing for Evans as he's battled drops and was behind the 8 ball due to UCLA's late graduation. So this guy is not having a good go of it. The Jets may simply redshirt Evans and roll with what they have at receiver behind Eric Decker and Jeremy Curley. So it looks like Eric Decker is the only relevant wide receiver on the Jets squad this season, and I use the term relevant loosely here because as the only viable receiving threat for the Jets, he will also be the only focus for opposing defenses. So he's going to be a very dodgy play for any fantasy player this year, really. Geno Smith throwing to him and being double covered most likely does not equal good things for Eric Decker's fantasy prospects. But some people may disagree with me on that, but those people are stupid.
Well, he's not only the only relevant wide receiver, but the only relevant player, period, across the board. Precisely. On that team. I mean, at least in the past, you could draft their freaking defense, but they're not even good for fantasy nowadays.
Yeah, no, the Jets. Stay away from the New York Jets.
All right, so that's it for the AFC East. On our next show, we'll be breaking down the major training camp headlines and position battles in the NFC. So join us next week for that when the Commish will be here alongside me in the beautiful state of Denver, Colorado. In the meantime, go to redzonewarriors.com where you can watch previous episodes, see our rankings, and subscribe to and rate our show via iTunes. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter and tweet us all your fantasy football questions at RedZoneWarriors. So for the Kush Man, I am Rob the Commish Smith, and remember, if you are taking a fantasy off season, you are already losing. We'll catch you next time.
Peace.